Out of 70 different operators in Rainbow Six Siege, there are operators you should play and operators you should stay away from. Which is why in today's video, I'll be going over 10 operators you need to stop playing in your ranked games. The first of which being Fuse. Now, I see a lot of people playing Fuse because Fuse has the AK-12 with a 1.5 times scope on it, which is actually a valid reason to play Fuse. But Ace also brings that same exact gun, so that's not really a viable reason to play Fuse as much. There are people with actual brains that play Fuse that use his cluster charges to get utility. Let's say if they're playing Azami or Fenrir, you can use Fuse to clear a lot of that utility. The issue is that the grenades coming out of his cluster charges are hard to predict exactly where they'll land in relation to the enemy utility, so sometimes it won't even work. Also, the biggest counter to Fuse is roamers. On very open maps like Chalet, Bank, or Clubhouse, it's a little bit harder to get fuses off that are reliable or useful, especially maps that are super open where the grenades oftentimes won't even land in the right place. And if you want to clear utility, there's so many better operators. You have Flores, Sledge, Zofia, literally anybody with frag grenades, anybody with a Gon 6, you name it, there's definitely just better options than Fuse. So using it for the AK or his utility isn't a good reason to use Fuse at all. Now, there's a special subcategory of people that like to use Fuse for kills, but if you just wanted to get cheeky kills with grenades, just do it with Capitao, who brings firebolts that you can get cheeky kills with from above, or just wait till you're on defense to get easy explosive kills with Capcan. The issue with Fuse is that him as an operator is a good idea in theory, but in practice, his utility just never really does what you want it to do, and it's a bit underwhelming. Very much like my next operator, Thorn. Now, just like with Fuse, the main reason people will play Thorn is because of the gun with the 1.5 on it, which is honestly fair. But if you wanted a great SMG with a 1.5 times scope on it, you have so many options. You have Mozzie, and you have Warden. You have Frost, and you have Turbo Rouse DMR. Castle and Pulse also bring the 1.5 on the UMP, but if you want a better gun, you have the MP5 on Doc and Rook. Or you can use Tachanka with the 2x scope. Hell, you can even use Echo or Goyo. There's a lot of options, even Wamai, where you can use the 1.5 times scope on an SMG, so it doesn't really make sense to play Thorn for that reason. The actual ability, too, is pretty bad. If we're talking about traps in the game that actually do damage and kill people, Thorn's is by far the worst. The delay on the gadget makes it to where if someone walks into the gadget, the amount of time they have to escape will make it to where 99% of the time they will escape. The only times that it works is if you bring barbed wire and you pair it up with the gadget and you put multiple gadgets in that barbed wire in a place where it's very hard for them to escape, like below windows or in doorways where if they leave they'll get shot. But that's just not often. Now, a lot of people might be saying that she brings a deployable shield, which is really enough to put her in a high spot in order for you to pick her. But there's so many other operators that bring a deployable shield that it's not even worth noting on Thorn. Minus the fact that Azami brings 5 deployable shields with her utility, you have Ella, Tachanka, Frost, Warden, Clash, Echo, Thunderbird, and I'm sure I missed a few there. Not only is Thorn's ability easy to dodge because of the delay, but Thorn's ability is also easy to dodge because of the loud sound and indicator that activates whenever you activate the gadget, which lets you know, hey, you're in a Thorn trap, just giving you a little heads up so you can leave because I'm useless. She does have some cool cosmetics like this, but that's about all that she really has going for her other than a 1.5 times scope. If you take away that 1.5 times scope, Thorn will never get played again because I think most people realize how bad of an operator she is, which is why you should not be playing her. Another operator that people realize is bad but play anyways is Amaru. Now, Amaru has one thing going for her, and that she's just fun to play. But if you want a fast-paced entry fragger, then you could easily just play Ashe. I don't know why you'd ever play Amaru over Ashe, because I feel like Ashe has slightly better weapons and has a more fun playstyle that's more reliable, but some people like to run Amaru anyways because the feeling of zipping through windows is a little exhilarating. If you like good weapons, then a lot of people like to play Amaru. She has the G8A1, which is one of the best LMGs in the game. She also has the best shotgun in the entire game if you want to run shotguns instead. She has an SMG11, which is one of the best secondary weapons in the entire game, or a Gon 6, or a secondary shotgun, and then flash grenades to further reinforce that playstyle of just running in and gunning. I understand that Amaru is fun to play, but if you look at the amount of times you'll actually win as Amaru when you're running her into sight, it's not much, so I just recommend that you find a different operator that you have fun with and stick to that instead. I mean, like, genuinely, I feel like the only reason people play this operator is because you just have fun zipping through windows. Fun is definitely the name of this operator. which is the complete opposite for Melusi. Melusi has got to be one of the most boring operators to play in the entire game, but that's not even one of the many reasons that I'm telling you not to play her. If we think about what Melusi does, it's essentially a bulletproof gadget unless activated that slows down the attacking rush. You know who else does that exactly? Fenrir. Fenrir slows down the attacker rush with a bulletproof mine that is only activated if someone walks in the radius of it. Now, the difference between Fenrir and Melusi is Fenrir has 5 gadgets, Melusi only has 3. Fenrir also blinds you, Melusi's don't. Fenrir's arguably make more noise, and his loadout is arguably better. You have a bailiff, you have barbed wire that pairs up with your gadget very nicely, whereas Melusi doesn't have barbed wire or a bailiff. She only has one of the worst shotguns in the game if you want to use sight setup. Now, she does have an MP5, but it doesn't have any good attachments on it other than the 1x scopes. So honestly, if you just stripped Fenrir of everything that made Fenrir good, you would have Melusi, which is why you should stop playing her. Why would you ever play Melusi over Fenrir? It just does not make sense. If I think of an operator that has literally nothing going for her, my first thought is Melusi, hands down. If you want to talk about an attacker that's just like that, then let's go over Blackbeard. Now, I do think Blackbeard is a tad bit underrated, but that's only because people think he's the worst operator in the game, and I think he's the second worst operator in the game. So, he's still pretty bad. Now, if you run the DMR and you hold tight angles like Blackbeard's shield was meant for you to do in the first place, then you can get some good value out of him when fragging, but that's only if the enemies don't have a high rate of fire SMG. If you go against an SMG like Ella's SMG, which has 1080 fire rate, your shield will get melted and so will your head before you have the reaction time to even see who's shooting you. The main issue with Blackbeard, if you haven't figured out, is that the actual shield that is meant to be Blackbeard's ability is paper mache. It's just not good. One of the many things that sucks about Blackbeard's shield as well is whenever you equip this thin piece of glass, somehow it makes you 200 pounds heavier, and you have to go way slower. Rappelling on windows with this thing is a nightmare too, because they'll be able to see your wide shield before you can even see them, and they'll still be able to somehow shoot you in the head, even when you have a shield in front of your face, so the ability literally doesn't even work anyways. If you want a good secondary to maybe back up the fact that both of your guns have terribly low ammo, well, you get a Deagle, which has even lower ammo and is even harder to use than the 2 primary options. Now, you think they'd make up with good secondary utility, but they don't. You have claymores, you have the recently nerfed frag grenades, and you have flash grenades, which you can't really use because they're not cohesive with Blackbeard's playstyle. If you're looking for somebody who can get kills with a good DMR, you could play Twitch. You could also play Lion. You could even play Buck DMR. If you're looking for somebody that has a good assault rifle and a good ability, you can play literally almost every single attacker, and it will be better, more reliable, and more useful than Blackbeard ever could be. He's arguably one of the most useless operators in the entire game and is in definite need of a rework. Now, most people know that Blackbeard is awful, but surprisingly, the same can't be said about Tachanka. Now, a lot of people have this stigma that Tachanka is the worst defender in the game, and honestly, that's not really that true. But it's not because he has semi-useful utility. A lot of people don't like Tachanka because of the way that his utility works, not necessarily that the utility is bad. And honestly, they're completely right. This thing absolutely blows. The issue with it is that it's way too clunky and way too slow, so by the time you pull it out and shoot with it, the attacker's already in your face and shooting you back. Not only this, but you have to reload it, which really sucks, and it kind of defeats the entire point of the operator, being that you can endlessly rain fire onto attacker entry points and waste a lot of time. But going over to Tonka's staple, we have the LMG. Now, half the time people aren't even running the LMG in the first place because you have the 9x91, which is a great SMG, but it also has a 2x scope or a 1.5. So really, there's just no point in running the LMG unless you need sight setup. But even then, half the time, your teammates will bring stuff for sight setup anyways, so you don't really need to use it. So all you're left with as an operator is a launcher that really sucks to use. Really, the only thing he has going for him is the fact that he brings a deployable shield that he can sit behind. But if you wanted an operator that could sit behind a deployable shield that their teammates can even bring, then you would just play Smoke or Ella. Tachanka is an example of an operator with the most amount of wasted potential I have ever seen, not because the ability concept is bad, but because of the way they executed his ability in the first place. I don't think Tachanka really needs a rework. I just think they need to make it to where he's faster paced to match the fast-paced meta, and you don't have to reload his launcher. Someone else who has a really uncomfortable and clunky launcher is Grim. Now, even with all of the Grim buffs and the Grim rework, I don't think Grim is worth playing in ranked at all. Now, I think in a competitive environment, in a 5v5 tournament mode, actual comp setting, and especially in Pro League, Grim is actually a very good pick on a lot of niche rounds. But in ranked, where people don't know how to coordinate with him or play him correctly, you just shouldn't be picking him. Now, in terms of loadout, Grim has a very, very nice loadout. I won't lie. He has the second best shotgun in the game with a very good AR and an assortment of scopes on that AR. Not only this, but he has a bailiff if he wants to make rotates or use his gadget through with the bailiff, and he has EMP grenades or hard breaching charges. So in terms of loadout, Grim really has it all. And that's why a lot of people make the mistake of trying to play him in a lot of different rounds, but you don't want to be doing this. This is because his actual launcher, which sits on his shoulder right here, is actually really bad. The issue with Grim is that he's disguised as a information utility operator, but the whole thing with Grim is you wouldn't be shooting Grim Bees to get information, you would be shooting Grim Bees at people you already have information on. The reason for this is because if you want information, drones are just going to be way safer to use than a launcher ever would, because you have to expose yourself with a launcher in your hands. They tried to mitigate this by making his Grim Bees bounceable, but it didn't quite work, because you still have to peak the angle to bounce it in the first place. And the bounce doesn't really go far enough to where you don't have to do that. Not only this, but he has the same exact issue as Tachanka. He has a slow launcher. Even after these speed buffs, it's still pretty slow and not fun to use. So the only time you'd reliably be able to use his Grim Bees is on a player that you know won't be able to peek you when you use the bees. But in order for you to know that, you have to already know that they're there, which defeats the entire point of the operator. He's just a little uncomfortable to use because of the launcher and just not all that good unless you have a coordinated stack, so I don't think a good loadout is enough to make you want to play an operator like Grim. Now, Grim is a really obvious don't play operator. A lot of people know that Grim is bad. The same cannot be said for an operator like Mira. Now, I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate in the comments for this one, but please hear me out before you get super mad at me. Mira just got the biggest nerf to her shield that she's literally ever had in her existence of being an operator. Yes, even a bigger nerf than being able to knife her Mira windows. Her mirrors are now able to be countered by Ashe and Callie. Now, Callie doesn't really matter unless you're playing on a map where the mirror windows are accessible to the outside, but Ashe does really matter, because Ashe is one of the most played entry fraggers in the entire game right now, which means that even if they don't know that you're bringing a mirror, you still might get countered because people just play Ashe a lot. If you have like one of my discs or ADSs in front of this mirror as well, they can just burn them with ease because everyone's bringing flash grenades and EMPs nowadays. Not to mention, on most sites that you play Mira, Buck can just go below, you can bring a Twitch, you can knife the mirror, you can Ashe or Callie it, you can just kill the person on the mirror, you can just not push where the mirror is, you can just ace Hibana or Thermite the mirror open if you somehow get to the window with the Thermite. I don't know why I even said that. And that's not even all of the counters. You can smoke it, grenade it, there's all kinds of stuff you can do to Mira to where it's not even that meta. Also, you can't really bring Mira every round even if she didn't have these nerfs, because there's some sites where Mira just isn't viable in the first place. So people maining Mira who were trying to live in the glory days of when she was an S tier operator are honestly just stuck in their old ways and aren't fitting the meta currently. Now, she does have a shotgun for site setup and a vector, which I think is really, really nice. But you know who else has a vector? Goyo, and he brings a 1.5 on the vector, so it's even better. He also has impacts for site setup, so there's really no point in bringing Mira if you want to bring her for the loadout. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this one, and that's fine. I just think Mira is highly overrated, and I wanted to give y'all at least a little bit of a warning that maybe you shouldn't be playing her as much as you think, but I still think she's semi-viable, which is not at all what I think when it comes to Glaz. Now, the issue with Glaz is the same exact issue that I have with Grim. Everyone started playing Glaz after Glaz got his loadout buffed. The same thing happened with Grim. Glaz's gun is okay at best. He does have the bearing 9 if you want a good secondary, or a Gon 6. Don't bring the Gon 6. And the secondary utility is pretty good because he has frag grenades, he has claymores if you don't want to get rain out on when you're repelled, or he has smoke grenades if you want to be actually able to use his ability. Here's the thing. You have to bring smoke grenades if you want to use his actual ability. If not, you're just a guy with a DMR with a really good scope on it. But here's the thing. Every DMR brings every single scope now. You can even bring the 3X if you still want to be a sniper. So there's no point in playing Glaz unless you have smokes. And because of Glaz's DMR, you need an automatic weapon secondary, which means you don't have grenades and you don't have a Gon 6. So you have no way of dealing with bulletproof utility reliably if you want to play Glaz correctly. You also only get 2 smoke grenades, which means that you would need to be able to have teammates that are bringing smoke grenades with you. And even if that wasn't the case, you still need teammates to push with you if you want to get a good Glaz execute down. Otherwise, you're just going to be a guy with a glorified DMR baiting and spawn the entire round doing nothing for your team. Which is why I think Glaz is just not at all a good operator, and you have to stop playing him if you are playing him every single day. It's just never going to be worth it. Someone else who is completely never worth it, and my 10th and final operator on this list, is Ela. Now, Ela really only has one thing going for her. She has the Scorpion or the FO12. These are both pretty amazing weapons. Even after the shotgun buff, this thing absolutely slams. Now, yes, Ela does have deployable shield, but I mean, there's plenty of other operators with a deployable shield, so I'm not even going to make that a noteworthy thing. The main thing that really kills Ela for me is the fact that her Grismot's mines are now pretty much useless. This is due to the fact that if you go into options, you go to accessibility, you're now able to turn screen shake intensity off, which makes Ela's gadget just a lot less useful because people are still able to shoot you even if they're stunned. The only thing this gadget really has going for it is that it eliminates sound, but you know who else has a trap that eliminates sound? Fenrir. So why would you ever play Ela when you have Fenrir on the board? It just doesn't make sense. Now, even though she does have a good primary weapon, being the Scorpion, it doesn't have a 1.5 times scope on it, which just is not favored in this meta currently. So I just don't recommend you play the operator because there's really nothing going for her, especially compared to better operators in the game right now. But that's pretty much it for this video. Check out this next video. My name's Alka, and I hope I'll see you there. Later.